Hi, I'm Jeff Gonzales, president of Trident Concepts, and I'm here with CCW Safe to talk about my new book, The Concealed Carry Manual. What we're going to be doing today is we're going to be talking about access versus concealment. So if you've been in the firearm industry for any length of time, you've probably heard the argument of speed versus accuracy. Now, on the one hand, obviously you want to be fast enough to have a positive effect on the outcome, right? But you can't be so fast that you miss, because you can't shoot fast enough to make up a miss. So that's the balance that we're always trying to achieve. And some folks have a much easier time achieving that balance. Others of us, it's a lifelong process. So within that same kind of thought process, there's a similar kind of dichotomy that exists in the concealment world, which is access versus concealment. So what I talk about this, and the first thing that I try to get across to people is that there's a time and a place for all of this. Unfortunately, no single solution is going to solve all your problems. I would be hard-pressed to even try to put a figure on my go-to is going to be able to handle everything all the time. It's just not realistic. Not if I want to live my life with a quality of life that I feel is like good. I'm probably going to have to do some things outside of that scenario there. So the first thing that I talk about is, let's talk about concealment. And there's various levels of concealment. The rule of thumb is the easier access, the less concealed. The more concealed, the more difficult the access. And that is, again, the dichotomy that I was talking about. So, what am I really talking about here? Well, let's talk about some situations where, okay, being maybe even deep concealment is a necessity or requirement. And what are those types of scenarios? Well, those types of scenarios exist if you have to move into a non-permissive environment. And another way to think of a non-permissive environment is a gun-free zone. So a gun-free zone could be anything. It could be a school. It could be a place of work that restricts firearms. It could be, past some sort of security, federalized security checkpoint. Whatever the case, that's a non-permissive environment. And I've worked in non-permissive environments overseas, and they're tricky because on the one hand, you've got a job to do. On the other hand, you also want to be able to protect yourself, and so you got to really walk a fine line there. So, some people in today's workforce choose to be armed, and their workspace could be a casual environment. Maybe it's a suit and tie, maybe it's more casual in dress of that nature. And to do a good job of carrying concealed once or twice is not that challenging, but to make a career of that is a very challenging task. And I always encourage people to put a lot of thought, approach that very carefully, put a lot of thought, and think about the consequences of what that could mean. Yes, it could mean getting in trouble. It could mean suspension. It could mean being fired. It could be a black mark on your career that travels with you wherever you try to go to a new employer. So just really take the time to evaluate that. Non-permissive environments are part of our landscape. There are, as we see gun rights continue to become more common in some places, we're also seeing some of the negative effects of that, which is business owners are exercising their rights to deny access to their business from firearms. And that's something that's happening more regularly now. You could choose to still carry concealed in these locations, but you are technically breaking the law. You could do so in your workplace, but you run the risk of serious consequences. So you have to balance all of that. The thing that I talk about is your concealment system should be able to adapt to whatever the situation is. Maybe your day-to-day uniform, if you will, is a pair of blue jeans and a untucked, loose-fitted t-shirt. Easy day. That's awesome. You can pretty much carry anything you want in those conditions. But you may have to, again, address the situation of, hey, maybe you have to go to your best friend's, I don't know, wedding, and you're going to need to dress up well. You might need to consider some other options then. And those options are going to probably put you in a position where now you're having to consider deep concealment. The other thing that I talk about is your concealment system should be mutually supportive of one another, meaning that I try to use the same firearm across all these different spectrums so that I don't have to have firearm for this, firearm for this, firearm for this. They mutually support all these different scenarios. And their micro compacts are doing a great job of doing this. And if you haven't considered exploring the micro compacts, that's a reason right there in and of itself, is that it allows you to do all these other things that you might not be able to do with your primary firearm. The last thing I talk about, well, it's not the last thing, but it's understanding your priorities, right? What is my priority? Well, is my priority to gain fast access to that firearm in a deadly force situation, or is my priority to keep the firearm concealed, not just from innocent bystanders, but from criminal elements, potentially terrorist elements, or any other prying eyes that I really just don't want? What is the priority there? Sometimes folks are going to side with, well, I want to have fast access to get to my gun, okay? And I get that, I understand that, I have similar thoughts, but I also have this idea that, okay, I need to consider that not every day am I going to have to be confronted with the likelihood of drawing my gun. I carry a gun in that off chance, but I have a much higher chance of interacting with people and going into non-permissive environments and having to work around all these different scenarios. That is a greater priority for me. So you got to kind of really think it through. And one of the last things that I talk about is work within those limitations, but be willing to kind of push outside of those boundaries. Because a lot of times what we find is we're just unwilling to do something because maybe we haven't ever done it, or maybe it has a perceived negative vibe to it from the internet or whatever. Explore them for yourself, make your own choices. Use what resources are available to help inform yourself, but then at the end, try to make your own decisions on your own. All right, if you want to learn more about the Concealed Carry Manual, you can go to concealedcarrymanual.com. If you have questions or comments, please feel free to post them down below. Until then, I'm Jeff Gonzales. Take care and stay safe.